When you say you can do a Peaky Blinders voice, is it just like a very like British accent?
So you watch the show. So you watched the show, I'm guessing.
I've only watched the first episode actually.
You know the older brother Arthur?
I don't. Was he in the first episode?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, then yes.
Yeah, I can kind of do his voice.
Tommy Shelby, we're Peaky Blinders in it.
Yeah, that's probably pretty close. I think that
It's the fact that Gavin just
He said
that.
yeah.
He's like, okay.
So you probably think it's like Peaky Blinders.
Listen, mate. Listen. It's like we're the fucking Peaky Blinders.
I mean, if that's it, then yeah, probably.
I hate that you don't know, but it's fine.
I've been rewatching Ted Lasso, which when this comes out, the new season will already be coming out, so it's great. The reason why I bring up Ted Lasso is because then they're also all British, and they all say like, almost in a Love Island way, when they're like,
oh well,
"Bruv."
babe, we got that. We got the Love Island accent down. We can talk in that all day.
You want to go for chat?
I got a
Are you
text.
regretting saying that we could both do this episode together?
Not yet, but we'll see. We're only like 2 minutes in. Welcome to the Dark Archive. I'm Gavin.
I'm Shyla.
And I'm Jordan.
And Jordan's a new face here. Whoa, new
Woo.
Jordan, you are the first like official guest on the pod.
Wow, that's pretty big.
Do you want to hear something else crazy? This is my first podcast ever.
Whoa.
Wow. This is your introduction moment. Like in the opening sequence, like normally like a person's first role, it's like introducing.
And
yeah,
now introducing.
literally.
Jordan.
Literally.
Literally?
Literally.
Literally.
She's literally having her introducing moment right now.
She's wittily podcasting right now.
I also would like everyone to know that Jordan and I are roommates, and we share about a quarter of a brain cell. So if that's not apparent in this entire episode, we got to work on it.
Yeah,
But
I feel like it should be oozing out of every orifice of this episode.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, and I mean, if I had come to you guys and we had recorded it in person, it would have been even more chaotic. So it's probably for the best that I didn't.
I think that's gotta happen someday.
I will. Jordan, next time you're on the pod, we're gonna all be in person.
Oh, I love that.
It's easy.
We'll all be
It's a date.
crammed onto this tiny little couch together.
Yeah, we could fit.
We could pull a chair to the side, but then it'll
No,
seem
I want
like
us
an
all. We
interview.
have to be on the same couch.
That's very podcasty, all like deep on a low couch. I should have brought my handheld. All deep on the
Yeah.
couch.
Gavin, I think all the cool kids nowadays are doing a handheld moment for the podcast, but like if you want to be a weeb and use your stand, like that's fine.
I know. But the reason that I can't be handheld is because I gotta read some facts about Peaky Blinders. I mean, I guess I could just be like, hey guys, like this is the Peaky Blinders facts. Next time.
If you can get to use your feet really well, maybe.
No, I don't want to see that happen.
Why would I be using my feet to hold the mic?
I was envisioning like the scrolling.
with your feet?
Oh,
my
like the
God.
oh.
Yeah.
So we would just see Gavin with his like knees up.
Put the
Like,
keyboard on the
table.
floor.
Yeah.
I hate that. Anyway,
Yeah, we're already talking about feet too much. The no go on the feet, guys. All right, so we're just gonna get right into it. This episode, special episode, we knew we were gonna have Jordan on, and I said to Shyla, "What does Jordan want to talk about?" And almost without any sort of prompt, Shyla was like, "Well, Jordan likes Peaky Blinders," so it was like great because that was on my like big main list of like topics. So I was like, great, we'll check that off the list. Boom.
well, it's like one of your favorite shows, right?
It is one of my favorite shows.
Yeah,
This is
which is
very true.
I've heard it's a very good show from a lot of people. I haven't had the chance to binge it. I was going to, and I mean, I think from the time when we first had the idea of when we were doing this episode to now, I totally could have binged it because it's been a minute. But a lot of work. And I'm gonna be honest, the first episode didn't immediately hook me. I knew that it was gonna get better, but like I watched the first episode and I was like,
That's what happened to me, but also it unfortunately was like a man was making me watch it. He was like, "You gotta watch this show," and so obviously, as soon as that happened, my brain was
You
like,
were already
"Ooh."
checked out. You
Yeah.
were already gone.
So I should probably give it another
I
go.
can't fault you for that. I think it took me like at least 2 or 3 before I was like, a man also unfortunately showed me this.
What is it with men and Peaky
don't
Blinders?
know. There's what is there not there? Like you have horses, you have Cillian Murphy, and you know, terrible PTSD from World War One. Like that's everything a man wants.
yeah, pretty much. And suits. They're in
And
suits,
perfectly tailored
and they wear the little hats.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all like in pubs being like, oi, with the Peaky Blinders.
Yeah.
That's all I've learned so far from it.
But like the show is very different from the actual game, right, Gavin?
Yeah. So that's a great prompt. That's what we're going to be getting into today. Surprisingly, like there wasn't as much information online about it as what I assumed that there would be. There was a lot of comparisons between the real life gang and the show. So it was a real gang in England. And by the end, we'll talk about some of the differences, some of which may surprise you. Stick around to the, I don't know if they will. Maybe they will. Depends on how surprised you get. So the Peaky Blinders, the real Peaky Blinders, and the ones in the show. You know what? Right now, we're just going to talk real Peaky Blinders. And then we'll talk about the differences. So when I say Peaky Blinders, these are real Peaky Blinders. Clarification, real Peaky Blinders. They were a street gang based in Birmingham, England. Birmingham, England is like kind of like right in the center of England. So Peaky Blinders were a street gang in Birmingham, England, which operated from the 1880s until the 1910s. The group consisted largely of young criminals from lower to middle class backgrounds. They engaged in robbery, violence, racketeering, illegal bookmaking, and control of gambling. Members wore signature outfits that typically included tailored jackets, lapelled overcoats, buttoned waistcoats, silk scarves, bell-bottom trousers, leather boots, and peaked flat caps.
Slay.
Yeah. Honestly, that's like kind of a fit.
It's kind of drippy as hell.
Yeah.
No, they really
The bell-bottom pants, damn.
the swag.
Yeah, in the 1880s.
Okay,
Except-
maybe at that time they probably looked a little bit silly, but I would see a man dressed like that in Bushwick today.
Yeah,
I probably
For
did
sure.
see a man dressed like that today somewhere in the city.
Yeah, probably. And I mean, we'll get into more of their fashion in a little bit, but that was, I know Jordan knows because it's in the show, very big part of their brand image of like was their fashion, and then their caps, which we'll get into, which comes to Peaky Blinders. But it's interesting that, I mean, I guess it makes sense that gangs, because they're all these different people, the one way to kind of make it like bring everybody together is through what they're wearing. I get, like, that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, it's identifying. So like you're walking in the street, it's like, oh man, that guy's hat, he's a Peaky Blinder. You don't have to fuck with him.
Can you imagine like that being the signal that that person's dangerous, like a fucking newsboy hat and bell-bottom pants? Be like, oh shit, I'm scared of him.
It's a different time, Kyla.
Yeah, I get that, but it's just kind of funny to think about now.
Yeah,
These
well,
days, yeah, I see a man with like a button-down shirt and slacks, and I'm like, oh my god, he works in Friday, and I want to.
Right, very different,
Scream.
but maybe still dangerous.
But also, clothing is telling me these danger signals.
right,
dangerous in a different way.
different way, very different way.
Well, but I
Very
think
different way.
that's also probably part of it, of that they also probably blended in more. It's not like West Side Story where they're like, you know, sharks, where it's like, oh, those are very obviously the sharks. It's like, oh, like it could just be a businessman, but then he's secretly like, because it was a lot of like, I don't even know if you'd call it like it's not even white collar crime, because there was just straight up violence, but with like gambling and stuff, it is a little bit more of like that high collar crime that like if they're like, are you guys gambling? They're like, no, we're just businessmen. Like we're just hanging out. Why? What do you look at me? I'm in a suit. I got bell-bottom pants. You think that I'm a criminal? No, I'm a Peaky Blinder. That's probably what they were all saying.
Yeah.
If I had to guess. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the history of the Peaky Blinders. We're going to talk about some notable members, some of which may have been on the show. Some of them weren't on the show. We're going to talk about their weapons and fashion because those go hand in hand. We'll see later. We're going to break down why it's called Peaky Blinders, which is a cool name. I mean, it'll be cooler when you understand when when it's broken down, but still a very cool gang name. Probably cooler than Sharks, the aforementioned Jets and Sharks. And then we're going to talk about what happened to them and how it compares to the TV show. So economic hardship in Birmingham led to a violent youth subculture, which happens a lot throughout time in any major cities when there's economic hardship. Poor youths frequently robbed and picked the pockets of men on the streets of slum areas of the city. These efforts were executed through assaults, beatings, stabbings, and manual strangulation. So this wasn't like Oliver Twist, like, oh, let's just pick his pocket. This is, let's go beat that guy up and take his wallet. They're not going quietly.
The use.
Yeah.
I just love the use. Like that. I think that's one of my favorite terms that pops up when you talk about history.
Youths derogatory.
Yes, literally.
Oh, these are
Youths.
definitely youths derogatory.
Uh-huh.
Just wait, they did some pretty nasty things. The origins of the subculture can be traced back to the 1850s, at a time when Birmingham streets were filled with gambling dens and youth playing rough sports. When the police started to crack down on these activities due to pressure from the higher classes, the youth fought back, youth derogatory, banding together in what became known as slogging gangs. These gangs frequently fought police and assaulted members of the public walking in the streets. During the 1890s, youth street gangs consisted of men and boys between the ages of 12 and 30. The late 1890s saw the organization of these men into a soft hierarchy.
You're telling me 12-year-olds were beating up the police?
Well, maybe they were like cheering them on while they did it.
They were on the
Like, they were,
sidelines
like,
going,
there.
yeah, go get him. Fuck
You're telling me there was a
12.
12-year-old in a
In
bell bottoms,
Yes.
and a newsboy hat?
Maybe
That
they,
actually
like,
does sound really scary to me
tripped
personally.
them, trip them over.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Children
Just-
are terrifying.
They
Isn't
can be.
12 like middle school?
Yeah.
Yeah,
These are
nothing is
ruthless.
scarier
Okay, wait,
than
yeah.
middle school
Actually,
boys.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true.
They walk up to the
And they
police.
smell.
They're like, hey, governor.
I'm from Birmingham and I'm 12 years old. And I sound like this because of all the pollution.
I need another listener note right now that this is a common voice that Jordan does in our home and around other people.
All the time.
It's like one of her special skills, I think. And I hope it keeps happening in this episode.
It's going to.
I'm sure it will continue to happen. The most violent of these youth street gangs. So there were a lot of little gangs. It's not like there was just one big gang immediately. In the late 1800s, the most violent of them organized themselves as a singular group known as the Peaky Blinders. So basically like, hey, you're hella violent. Come join our crew. We're all going to be super violent and like take over. Their origin is somewhat shrouded in mystery, but it is believed that the gang emerged in the late 19th century in the city of Birmingham, England. They were likely founded in Small Heath after being name dropped in a newspaper article entitled "A Murderous Outrage at Small Heath, a Man's Skull Fractured." After this article, many gangsters sent letters to various national newspapers declaring themselves as members of the specific group. So in the newspaper clipping, which I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of blurry. I only had a picture of it. But it was basically like, oh, these like Peaky Blinder kids like beat a guy's skull. And so then all of a sudden now all these gangsters, because the most gangster thing to do is write a handwritten letter and send it to the newspapers and be like, I'm with them. I'm with those guys. The guys that you said were super badass, I'm with them. Totally.
It's
So
giving I'm with her.
no verification.
No.
Just like, hey, I'm with them. Send.
But listen, it's like intimidating if it's like, here's proof that like this group will literally kill you so bad, and here's like the evidence. Like, of course you want to say that you're with them so that no one fucks with you.
True.
Although, like at this time, I mean, were these like signed letters? Like, were people like identifying themselves? Do you know?
Yeah, like I think that these were then. I mean, I say many gangsters, but like they weren't anonymous letters. They were people being
'Cause,
like,
like-
I am a part of the Peaky Blinders.
Do the police not like arrest people at this time? Like, why is it just like, oh, well, I'm in a gang, so you can't arrest me if I like taunt you this way?
Well, a lot of gangs were embedded with the police.
Yeah, that's also true.
So I feel
True.
like, economic hardship, it's this breeding ground of corruption. You have the potential not only for these gangs to happen, but also for them to infiltrate cops because, they're controlling money. They're
Yeah.
mugging people. They're not only are they doing that, they're like rigging the betting system. They're making all these profits. Cops want to check. So if they get a little extra cash money to look the other way, and then that area of the city is under the gang's control, and they can kind of like focus on their other things that I guess cops need to do. I don't know what that is, but in this day, playing games on your phone in the subway station. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I forgot how gangs worked for a second there.
I mean, also, I guess if
But-
they're not actually being like caught in the act of doing something, like, I mean, I'm sure they didn't have the same
True.
type of judicial system they do now in
Yeah.
the 1800s in England, but like they probably couldn't like try them for anything if they weren't actively like, especially people who like weren't there. Like, yeah, the few guys who beat the guy's skull, they probably got in trouble, but other people being like, we're with them,
Yeah.
maybe not, I guess.
Yeah.
But slowly from that article, it's just that was the first, like the earliest known like newspaper mention of the Peaky Blinders. So like they were probably around before, but that was like the first mention of them. But their first activities primarily revolved around occupying favorable land, notably the communities of Small Heath and Cheapside, Birmingham. Their expansion was noted by their first gang rival, the Cheapside Sloggers, who battled against them in an effort to control land. What kind of name is that?
That sounds like a baseball team.
It does.
better yet, a lesbian softball team.
Yeah, that's
Wait.
exactly what it sounds like.
Someone get on that.
Where is the screenplay?
Where's the movie musical about the Cheapside Sloggers
Literally.
Oh my God.
We need
from
her
the streets of
yesterday.
England to victory, to winning the World Series or whatever
Hmm.
softball series? Surprisingly, the Sloggers originated in the 1870s and were known for street fights in that same area, Bordesley and Small Heath, which were extremely poor slums of Birmingham. So obviously, like Jordan was saying earlier, like they're taking over. They're like, also they're going after the poor people because then that's the land that no one's gonna fight back against them. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
now this gang, they're like, we're in control of this area. Everything's going through us, like money, betting, police. Like they're just slowly trying to build out. And I guess a good way is to start in the quote poor slums of Birmingham because they're not gonna have the money or resources to fight back.
Yeah.
But then the Peaky Blinders, after they established controlled territory in the late 19th century, began expanding their criminal enterprise. Their activities included protection rackets, fraud, land grabs, smuggling, hijacking, robbery, and illegal bookmarking. Historian Heather Shore of the University of Leeds claims that the Blinders were more focused on street fighting, robbery, and racketeering as opposed to more organized crime. So that's what kind of makes Peaky Blinders, I don't even want to say different because a lot of gangs are known for being violent, but while there were a lot of gangs that were doing the more organized crime, they were like, we're gonna go through anybody we have to get what we want. And then they immediately were known for being like super violent, which they can wear whatever the hell they want if they're known as the one that's going to be the most violent.
I feel too like this, given the fact that in contrast, other gangs were a little bit more organized or maybe had a little bit more ambition at the time. This was like a ripe breeding ground for gang activity. like right before World War One. Industrialization has racked Europe. We're going to factories. We're working 12 hours. Our children are working with us. We're living in slums and crowded cities because everyone's coming here to get a job. Like there's all of these other environmental factors that allowed these things to thrive and allowed these groups to capitalize on that.
It's like very easy to take advantage of people that are desperate.
Very true. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Also because I say I'm sure, but I'm not sure because I wasn't there. But I'm sure for the most part, people, especially who ended up joining gangs, probably felt like nobody was looking out for them because there were so many other things going on in the world as it was leading. Like they disbanded right around the 1910s. Just not to spoil it, obviously, a lot of them went to prison and like got locked up. And I'm sure whoever remained, a lot of them were probably drafted and probably died in the war anyway, since they were all then like young men, like 20s and 30s, like prime age to be drafted. So they probably felt like nobody was looking out for them. So all of a sudden, if they're violent, but it's the camaraderie of having a group that like, all right, me and my family are protected because we're a part of the group. And like, that's, that same kind of mentality that then they can look out for each other. And then it just got incredibly violent, which I'm sure some people believed in. And I'm sure a lot of them probably didn't believe in, but they knew, hey, it's either join them or I know there's a saying that's like, join them or
if you can't beat them, join
yeah,
them.
that's that one. So, yeah.
Again, we're like literally explaining like regular gang dynamics and like it's not it's not a new thing, but
that's fair.
I mean, this is just I think we're like obviously because of the fact that it's a show and whatever, like, and we're like joking around, but like at the end of the day, this was like a gang. Like it's a real gang.
An incredibly violent gang. Like they were one of the biggest things about them is that they were known for their violence, which is why the shows, skipping ahead a little bit, Jordan, the Peaky Blinders, spoiler alert, what are they known for doing with their fashion and weapons?
Putting razor blades into the fold of their little newsboy cap so they can blind people.
Yeah, that's pretty violent.
Yeah, so that's why they're called Peaky Blinders, because they're blind.
I thought it was because of the horses.
No.
Because the horses have blinders? Like that, it's like the horses are
maybe there isn't. Yeah, maybe there's.
I thought it was like a play on words.
We're gonna get into like breaking down the etymology of the word, but just the example of like that they're known for like from the show for having the razor blades and the caps, that just shows that very violent. Even
Aren't
though
there horses in the show too, though?
Yes, there are.
There are. Yeah, they ride horses.
Don't.
Okay.
I'm just like, I see what you were thinking.
It's like, why did I think that? And I was, if there's like not a single horse in the show.
There's actually no horses in that universe. That cinematic universe has no horses.
No horses.
I don't know. I've seen the one episode, guys. Just remember that.
That's fair. But so anyway, back to the point. They were known for their violence, not just towards rival gangs, but also against innocent civilians and constables. Gang wars between rival gangs frequently erupted in Birmingham, which led to brawls and shootouts. The Peaky Blinders also deliberately attacked police officers in what became known as constable baiting. Constable George Snipe was killed by the gang in 1897, as was Charles Philip Gunter in 1901. Hundreds more were injured and some left the force because of the violence. In 1899, an Irish police chief named Charles Haughtington Rafter was contracted to enforce local law in Birmingham. However, police corruption and bribery diminished the effectiveness of his enforcement for a time. So, very violent. If the police are going to go against what they say, fuck the police. If just some random Joe Schmo is going to go against them, fuck Joe Schmo. Like they are just like, fuck everybody. We're going to beat everyone up. So moving into some notable members of the Peaky Blinders. We'll touch upon this sooner. As I keep saying, I feel like all I ever do is tease. Oh, we're going to talk about that later in any episode.
Gotta keep them baited. I get it. I get your tactics.
But spoiler alert, what's his name in the show? Thomas Shelby. He is not real.
No, he's fake.
He's not a real person.
He's fake.
I can't believe it.
I know. It's tragic. It makes sense
honestly is.
that they would make up a person for the show so that they don't have to keep it historically accurate. But there were some known names of people in Peaky Blinders and people that characters were most likely based on. So the most powerful member of the Peaky Blinders was a man known as Kevin Mooney. His real name was Thomas Gilbert, which what is the guy in the show? What did I just say?
Thomas Shelby. Yeah.
So most likely based on this guy, but he routinely changed his last name. He was known for his violent and ruthless tactics and was feared by both his fellow gang members and rival gangs. So most likely Thomas Shelby was based on Thomas Gilbert or Kevin Mooney, and understandable that he changes his name. Other prominent members of the gang were David Taylor, Ernest Hayes, Harry Fowles, and Stephen McNichol, which all sound like Muppet names. Except for David Taylor.
Nickel.
The McNichol got me.
Are you kidding me?
Got me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to any like probably Irish person that's actually
David
named
McNichol.
that.
David Taylor, that's a
kidding.
pretty normal name. 2 first names. Ernest Hayes. All right, that's a pretty normal name.
Yeah.
That kind of goes hard. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
That name's kind of great.
Yeah. Harry Fowles. All right. Not bad. And
Yeah.
Stephen McNichol.
That's just like that's both like amazing and like so embarrassing at the same time.
Good old Stevie McNichol.
Stevie Mickey.
Well, you get them in a lineup and it's like Thomas Gilbert, like the most feared gang leader. David Taylor, Ernest Hayes, Harry Fowles, and Stephen McNichol.
You know Stephen McNichol was 5'2". You know he was 5'2".
What if he was like actually really terrifying, but he just had this like stupid name?
That would be even better. The contrast would be amazing.
I would love that.
True. You want to talk about scary guy? We just listed off these guys. You want to know Harry Fowles? You want to know what his nickname was? If you haven't read ahead, baby-faced Harry.
Do you think it's because he couldn't grow facial hair?
Yeah, it was because he looks like a child. Let's pull up a picture.
You have a picture of him.
Oh my god! Yay!
So these are the homies.
Oh my god!
I already know which one he is.
Harry!
Oh, he is a baby face.
So actually,
oh my
yeah,
god, that's terrifying.
You could see their names at the top.
Yeah.
That Harry Fowles, he was 19. He's 19 there, I think.
He looks 19.
No, he looks 12.
I don't know. I feel like nowadays, like 19-year-olds look really old, but like, you know how we always joke that when we were like 14, we didn't look like the way that 14-year-olds now do. Like,
Yeah.
I could see 19-year-olds just being like that.
I guess that's fair.
But also it probably is like he has like a kind of roundish face,
Mm-hmm.
like very like
He
soft
does look like he's sitting on a booster
features.
seat
He
in
does kind of
this.
look like that.
I don't know if you
Why?
can see below there. For those listening on audio, it says born in 1885. So he and the guy next to him also was 1885. Do you guys see how tall he is?
No, I can't read that from here.
Oh my gosh, he's 5'2" and a half.
Are you kidding me?
Shut
Wait, no,
the
you said
fuck
you said
up.
Stephen McNichols was 5'2".
I did, but I think that is kind of funny.
But that is great.
That is
McNichol is the third one. Do you see how tall he is?
5'4" and a half.
Okay, but
I wasn't
like
that far off.
you weren't far off, which is kind of funny. He is kind of scary looking though.
Which one?
Like he's got Stephen McNichol.
McNichol?
He's got this like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you're listening to this, he's like kind of like hunched almost, like his shoulders are up, his
Yeah.
hands are folded. He like, I don't know, if I saw that guy on the street, I'd probably be like,
A little spooky.
Yeah, a
He's
little
very
bit.
heavy shadow across his eyes.
Yeah.
Like, the hat's really giving off menacing.
Yeah.
So he knows how to wear that hat.
And I mean, Ernest Haynes is the second guy. He kind of looks like who are the people that live in Whoville? What are they called?
A who?
Or no, like the one in the Grinch. Like the people in the Grinch. Is that Whoville?
Yeah,
That's
that's still
still a
who
All right,
knows.
yeah. So he looks like a who.
Still a who.
He looks like a who.
Yeah,
Kind of.
because Cindy Lou Who, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're Lou's.
Although he's also 19, so I guess
Like I thought he was kind of giving Slender Man.
Interesting.
yeah. But then it says Thomas on the far right, so I
Our guy.
assume that that's Thomas Gilbert, who is like
Mhm.
20 years older than the other guys. So if they're
Yeah.
19, he's probably like 39 there.
Wow.
And also, can you see how tall he is there?
5'4".
Short kings.
They're all short. I mean, yeah, I guess they have to make up for the fact that they're short. Not that there's anything wrong with short kings. It's just never been a problem I've
This
personally had
is
to deal with.
not justification for short kings to be violent, terrible people, just to
Yeah.
note.
No.
Short kings, please.
So our boy baby-faced Harry was arrested for stealing a bicycle. Cute. He was just stealing a bike. In 1904. McNichols and Haynes were also arrested at the same time for stealing a bicycle, and they were also arrested for home invasion, respectively.
Oh.
Two very different things.
Yeah,
Haynes
very
was the
0
second.
to 100.
Haynes, the second guy, was arrested for home invasion, and McNichol he stole a bike, I believe.
Okay, wait, this makes
That
sense.
tracks.
So
This makes a lot of sense.
yeah, and then each one was held for 1 month for their crimes. West Midland police records describes the three arrested as foul-mouthed young men who stalked the streets in drunken groups, insulting and mugging passersby. Taylor was arrested at age 13 for carrying a loaded firearm. That's our
I wish
boy-
they did more of that these
Wait.
days.
Arrested 13-year-olds?
For having loaded firearms? Yes.
I mean, yeah, perhaps that.
None of those people are in this show, but the writer of the show, he grew up in Birmingham, and he based Thomas like a little bit on this, but he also like grew up hearing all these stories of the gangs that lived there from like his grandparents, and they got them from their great grandparents, and he kind of took some creative liberties with who and what he decided to talk about. But a lot of the like peripheral characters in Peaky Blinders, like the Italian gangster that comes in and like one of the seasons, and like the Orthodox Jewish gang leader who's played by what's his face? Oh my gosh, the guy who plays Venom.
Oh, Tom Hardy.
Yeah, Tom Hardy's character, he's also like a real guy that existed. But there was another gang in Birmingham, or at least in the adjacent area at the time, that was like a lot more prominent and a lot more like, you know, successful when it came to the organized things. And a lot of the big events that happened in Peaky Blinders, like he basically just put the Peaky Blinders to those events. He was like, what if the Peaky Blinders were like actually very successful? Because, you know, they were violent and they had their name to them, but I don't think they didn't really reach past some of these things. Like they engaged in all of the gang activity, but they never really like gained the notoriety that this show kind of makes them, you know, in the respects of like, oh, we're going to start a company and we're going to be able to make millions of dollars and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. They never reached that level of like organization. So he kind of like stole some of the historical things and was like, what if Thomas Shelby did that? So I think that's it's kind of interesting to see the level of like historical accuracy and real characters versus like also like this imagined, like based on these caricatures of people he heard of from like people in his family. I think that's kind of an interesting situation. But yeah, to answer your question before we started this thing of like, let me know if any of these people are real in the show. They're not, but that's okay. It's almost cooler that way, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely a more small localized story in that, like you said, they didn't reach huge notoriety. They were just known to be in the one little area and didn't grow to then become a whole thing, which I think what you were also saying, another reason could be probably also leading up to World War One. If you've got more of your members just getting arrested and then eventually people starting to get drafted, that then it's like, all right, you know what? We're not going to become a big time thing. Also, as much as maybe Birmingham was, maybe it was a bustling place, but I'm sure there were bigger gangs even in just like London or the other neighboring, even bigger cities.
I also feel like, I mean, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but generally the gangs that last the longest and are the most successful, if that's the word you want to use, like they're the ones that fly under the radar a little bit,
Yeah.
because like if you're all getting caught, if everyone knows who you are, like yes, that's scary, but I think there's also like something to the like that world where like you don't actually know everybody who's in it, that like makes it more of a threat because you don't really know like who to watch out for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like while clearly they did a lot of damage while they were around, like it sounds like the kind of thing that it would like burn out very quickly just because it was like so aggressive and so like full force kind of tactics. Like if you're all getting arrested over and over again, like that's not really gonna like help you do whatever you're trying to achieve, right? Like it doesn't really help at all.
No.
Yeah. And if everybody starts to know not only just the specific people, but like, all right, if you see someone well dressed in a flat brim cap that looks vaguely suspicious, more likely they're going to be a gangster and not just a well dressed person. So now all of a sudden everybody knows what to look out for. And it's like, all right, let's avoid the areas where they are. And then just like, sure, yeah, they could be, quote, successful by like taking over areas that then people aren't really going in those areas and the police aren't really messing with them because the police don't want to be messed with. But then everybody, yeah, it's all out in the open. Everybody knows who you are. And what else
Right.
is there? They can't really expand because there's going to be other bigger gangs that are flying under the radar that will just take them out. Like, boom. Like, they're nothing. Dust.
Right.
But they're, while they were causing havoc and terror, as I've said, the weapons and fashion were very important part of who they were. In addition to guns, which, a classic way to cause violence, the Peaky Blinders used an assortment of melee weapons, such as belt buckles, metal-tipped boots, fire irons, canes, and knives. In the case of George Eastwood, he was beaten by belt buckles. So, like, it starts to get more graphic.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's like I feel like it's hard to actually conceptualize like how violent that is. Like to me, that's actually more like gruesome than you stabbing or shooting someone,
Yeah,
because you
for
have
sure.
to like repeatedly hit
it's
somebody
personal.
Yeah.
hard to kill
melee
them that
weapons
way.
are all like you have to be within a certain distance
Right.
of someone. You're looking them in the eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
The knife drains out of their body.
Whoa.
Yeah. Or like if you're using like metal tip boots and then you kick someone, now they're on the ground and you just like are still
Right.
like that
God.
is incredible. Like we're laughing and joking about it, but incredibly
So
gruesome and violent. And
fire oh god, that's
yeah.
really scary.
One of the police constables, Police Constable Barker, Percy Langridge, used a knife to stab the constable in June 1900. Firearms such as Weebly revolvers were used, such as in the shooting and killing of a Summer Hill Gang member by Peaky Blinder William Lacey in 1905. So, I mean, a lot of the reason why they know what people used is because of then the people that they were able to successfully kill, because then it was like, oh, they killed this other gang member by a gun, but then it's like, imagine the people who didn't end up getting killed and like, or like bodies that weren't found, that the gruesome ways that they could have killed all these other people that like weren't even known, because the only way for them to know would be if then it was in the newspapers or in police reports or something. Oh.
I'm curious, like, is there any information on like I can understand them going for another gang member, but was there any particular rhyme or reason to like who they targeted, or is it just like anyone who crossed them kind of thing, or like anyone, like as you said before, like anyone they had to get through
Yeah.
to get what they wanted, like those are the people they were attacking?
Well, they were known for also attacking civilians, so I would
So just, like,
assume
random
it's more of
people.
like they bump into them at the bar, that it's like
Right.
they're all just angry and like, yo, let's go outside, like let's handle this outside, like I'm gonna take my belt off and I'm gonna beat you with my belt buckle. Aside from people that were maybe random, like bumped into, like I don't think there was necessarily rhyme or reason, which is then almost more
Scarier.
scarier and more gruesome, that it's like they're just attacking whoever, not just like fellow gangs. Understand, they're fellow gangs. Police, they're trying to enforce you to stop doing that. Understandable. But just like random civilians, that's where it's like showing their morality of like, or lack of.
Yeah, I think it goes to show the volatility that can occur when you live in close quarters with people during a time period where there's so much economic strife and there's so
Yeah.
many different cultures mixing in one place as more people come to, you know, England in general in attempts to be a part of industrialization. Like, this is just flint and tinder to pre-existing issues, and then, you know, you just have people who have a lot of feelings and don't know how to escape them, and so it's just like the perfect recipe for disaster in that way. And you can't really, this is even before World War One, so it's like, if this is the emotional state of men in this country before they get sent to a war that they don't really have a reason to be in, like, oof. And the show itself takes place after World War One, so like they don't even like they kind of like press pause on this and even like, you know, jump in the future. And like I feel like that's almost trying to justify or find meaning. Like, here we are too, trying to find meaning or be like, oh, I don't know, like why would they kill people? And it's like, I don't know, like sometimes there isn't reasoning, and sometimes there isn't a good guy, and sometimes there isn't a bad guy, and sometimes guys are just guys, and sometimes you could kill someone, and I don't know.
Just guys being dudes,
Just
I guess.
guys being dudes.
Yeah.
Also, in the show, like some of them are related, right?
Yeah. I mean, the big emphasis and a big theme is like family, and I think that ties into some of the things we've been talking about, where it's like, oh, you have this group and you want to protect them. And that's very driven through, because it's like the Peaky Blinders all stem from the Shelby family. And like, you know, you have Tommy, you have Arthur, you have some other family members. They're all like either cousins or their brothers, and their father was in charge before them. And there's this like blood tie, but then also the people they choose to take under their wing, they seem to be driven with this very heavy moral compass of what is right and wrong, which is very ironic given, you know, the things they are putting themselves up to in the historical context of what the group did. But it does seem like the show's trying to attribute that moral code to this situation and maybe try and find meaning, and that's maybe more of a thematic device, again, to like acknowledge the sins of World War One and a lot of the issues that the common person faced in industrializing England. But yeah, family's a huge thing, whether that be blood or not, and that I think we can assume was an element of the gang that could ring true, but who knows? I'm not in a gang.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah. No, again, like we're talking about things that I'm sure are very obvious to some people. But again, it's because we aren't part of this world. And I feel like that's important to acknowledge. Like, a lot of this is appalling to us, but like, you know, gang violence is still obviously very present. So, you know.
And probably just less well-dressed people. Or potentially still well-dressed people. We don't even know.
I mean, I think they would beg to differ with you, but like...
And I'm not going to fight them on that. They are however well-dressed they think they are. I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, we're like all looking at this from a really outside lens. So just take everything we're saying with a really big old grain of salt.
Absolutely.
Well, and even like we're talking about stuff that happened like well over 100 years ago.
Exactly.
Like, well, not well, just over 100 years ago, in the late 1800s into the 1900s. And yeah, I'm sure family was, I can imagine in more of the real world context that it's a similar type of thing that's shown on television where, yeah, if there's some older brother in the gang and all of a sudden he's got a younger brother that turns 12 and he's like, I want to do what you're doing. And then it's like, they probably try to keep him out of it, but then it might be safer to bring them into it, even though that's also still a very dangerous option.
Right. Like, a lot of times you just get trapped in it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't really have a choice.
Yeah. And especially like then maybe if somebody's father was in it, now all of a sudden the kids are brought into it against his will, that it's like, hey, yeah, bring your kids in. And he's like, no, like, I'm trying to protect my family. And then it's like,
And again, like the political and economic and cultural context in which these things were allowed to thrive. And like even in the US, if we're talking about like gang culture, we think about like Al Capone, right? Like our classic gangsters. That requires a certain type of environment that's very specific to that time to thrive to that extent. That's not to say that it can't thrive regardless and that these insular groups can't thrive regardless, but these eras of gangster activity that we're talking about are settled within a very particular historical context that lend itself to like their activity and like, you know, everything that happened. So it's definitely interesting to think about.
I mean, like even the fact that with them, with the Peaky Blinders, like their big thing was like land, like commandeering land. Like that makes so much sense at that time. Like whoever has like, I mean, I'm assuming, especially at this time, I would assume that a lot of it is like who's like controlling the farmland, right? And like who are the like landlords, and like tenant farming is a big thing in this time. Like those people are all answering to like the big landlord. Like
Even more importantly, especially as we're thinking about like industrialization in the cities, not only that, but the resources, the factories where we're making these resources, we're making iron, where we're making railway supplies, where we're making cars, where we're working with our hands, you know, that is like also a big thing. You want to control, you know, where are the police getting their guns? Where are they getting their weapons? There are like all these different imports and exports that are happening because of industrialization. And so they're also fighting to take control of what is coming in and out of the land that they feel like they own and the place that they live.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, who can be in control of this resource so that we can have a better say over all of these things that are happening to us that we feel like we don't have a say over.
Yeah, that's true. And like who works in those factories, and it's like,
do they get time off and do they get fair wages?
what are their benefits?
Yes.
Yeah, like I'm assuming, I mean, I'm like making conjectures now, but like if they wanted to cause problems, they can like slow down production of a factory or something. Like those are all things that actually have a pretty big impact if you have like effective control over it, which it sounds like they probably did.
Yeah. Well, and especially I'm sure because all these people that were joining, not just Peaky Blinders, but all of these gangs, not even just in this area, just all over, that it was mostly due to them being lower to middle class of like, because of their economic hardships. There was no wealthy guys being like, you know what, I'm also going, in that case, it'd probably be more towards organized crime. But there's no like CEOs that's like, I'm gonna go pickpocket someone, because they didn't need to, or they didn't need to go rig gambling or like pay off the police. I mean, they might have needed to pay off the police, but
again, it's just like who they can take advantage of the most easily, like who's the easiest person to kind of like bully, really.
And it's basically just everybody fighting to not be on the bottom,
right?
Basically, even when they were on the bottom because of their economic situations. But damn it, the Peaky Blinders, they looked good. They were in their bell-bottom pants.
They were terrible people, but they looked so slay.
They were violent, but damn it, they looked good doing it.
They were slaying while they slayed.
They were. Gang members frequently wore tailored clothing, which was uncommon for gangs at the time. Not a surprise at all. Like, nobody's like, all right, guys, let's go beat up another gang. Someone's like, wait, my jacket's at the tailor. Like, can we hold off? Can we push to next Tuesday?
It's giving like in high school when there was like a spirit day and you and your friends had to go to the store together to make sure you all had the same shirt. Like, do you think they all went to the local, like whoever, tailor? And they were like, can we need like 12 of these. They gotta be 12 same color.
Bell-bottom pants.
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
I kind of just love that they had to. I love that for them. It's pretty cute, honestly. It is very girly pop of them.
Here's some more about what they wore. Almost all members wore a flat cap and an overcoat. The Peaky Blinders wore tailored suits, usually with bell-bottom trousers and button jackets. Wealthier members wore silk scarves and starched collars with metal tie buttons. Their distinctive dress was easily recognizable by city inhabitants, police, and rival gang members. The wives, girlfriends, and mistresses of the gang members were known for wearing lavish clothing. Pearls, silks, and colorful scarves were commonplace. So, like,
okay, so there were like wealthier members too.
Yeah, probably
So that
more
means that they
leading.
could be tapped into all
Funding.
levels of the like they
Yeah.
could be working with the wealthier people with more organized crime stuff. Like they really found their way into everything.
A tension in the show that, again, is fictional, but is in the show that kind of like deals with this is like they get to a point where they're making all this money and they are rubbing elbows with like high society, and yet high society still does not accept them because their money was given by illegitimate means
Yeah.
and was illegal.
And they're not like from that class. They like
they clawed their way up.
What's it like the new money versus old money
Yeah.
thing?
Exactly. And like even though they make efforts in the stories to like basically launder their money or like funnel it through their own LLC and like make it feel more legit and be like, we're business owners and this is how we're making our income, it's like everybody knows. And so even though like these things are symbolic, and being able to give your honey girl like a nice ass scarf is amazing, and I'm sure she loved it, it didn't do anything to solve the class issues that they were facing, and probably just fueled the fire even more, because they're like, I just bought my girl like the nicest dress, and like, why can't she come to your dinner party, Carol? Like,
Yeah. It probably, because like to a point, they probably had a very fake it till you make it attitude of like, people think so much less of us because we are lower class and don't have as much. So if we can at least put the appearance of having much, it'll be that much more unexpected, and like maybe they'll respect us. And then if they continued to not respect them, even when they were making money and like right up there with them with wealth, but then it was dirty money. So then it's like they didn't make it. It wasn't generational wealth. So
I hate I don't want to sound like I'm like sympathizing with them by any means, but it is
they're
kind
not
of like
around. No one's gonna like. They're not gonna be like, yes, Shila's reigniting the spark of the Peaky Blinders. They're not here anymore.
Well, I just feel like, again, as we've said many times, like there's so many factors that come into like how you get in these situations, and I'm sure some portion of these members were just like trying to create better lives for themselves, for their families, like whatever. So like there is a part of me when you like think about that reality that like, I don't know what word to use because I don't want to say it makes me sad, but again, like classism never goes away. Like those tensions never really, like no matter what, they never go away. And if you're like really trying to think about why these people were doing them, which again, like we don't know, like some of them may have just been really violent people, and that's a whole different thing. But I don't know. It's like, it's a weird thing to think about, just like trying to reason and then with that reasoning, like being like, damn, the rich people still suck.
yeah. Like it's too real. It's almost too real. Sometimes you're like, oh, maybe I can also envision myself like wanting to blind someone. FBI agent in my phone, don't listen right now. But it's like, maybe if someone was mean to me and like treated me like shit because of something I couldn't control, I would want to beat the shit out of them. Like, I don't know, like sometimes you just get to a point.
Yeah, like you said, it's like that is the only way that they can think of to like handle whether it be like the emotions or just like the general situation. Like clearly if they thought there was a better way, they wouldn't have done this.
Yeah, and they didn't have therapists, really.
They didn't have what?
They didn't really have therapists.
If these men were in therapy, whoa,
like, you go get a lobotomy.
Different game if they were in therapy.
If they were in therapy, can you imagine the good?
If the short kings with good style had been in therapy, they actually could have been pretty dope people.
They probably could have. They could have been true short kings.
Damn, disappointing.
Bigger up to the short kings. And now, about an hour into it, we're going to talk about etymology of Peaky Blinders. Finally, we're going to break it down. For those of you who don't know, etymology is the history of a word. So the folk etymology of Peaky Blinder is that the gang members would stitch disposable razor blades into the peaks of their flat caps, which could then be used as weapons. However, as the Gillette Company introduced the first replaceable safety razor system in 1903 in the United States, and the first factory manufacturing them in Great Britain opened in 1908, this idea of the origin of the name is not very likely to be true. Basically, there weren't
Sad.
razor blades for them to put in their hats that didn't exist in
I'm
theory
really
when they
upset
were
about
around.
it.
Could they have been using other things? Like, could they have like nails in their hats or something?
I mean, I don't know. I feel
Yeah.
like the
There were
benefit
still
of
sharp
the razor
objects.
is that it hides so nicely in the fold because it's like
Yeah.
a thin profile.
Yeah.
That is kind of like, I don't know. That like fight tactic to visualize is pretty. I mean, I'm sure in the show they do, and I'm just being stupid right now. But like, can you imagine someone just like whips their hat off and they're like, "Ah,"
Yeah, literally that's what
And
they
they
Yeah,
do.
that's
And it's like, I'm
Getcha.
assuming because they'll be like going into in the show. Again, we're tangenting to the show, but like that's what I'm going to talk about. But they'll be like going into a place where like they're like no weapons, guys, and they're like take all my weapons, like it's fine, and then they're just like holding their hat, and it's like oh, and then boom, like they can just
Yeah.
fuck people up, and it's pretty crazy.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely just helps them. It helped their brand identity, create that
Yeah.
image, you know.
Really strong marketing campaign.
Oh, for sure. British author John Douglas from Birmingham claimed hats were used as a weapon in his novels A Walk Down Summer Lane. Members with razor blades sewn into their caps would headbutt enemies to potentially blind them, or the caps would be used to slash foreheads, causing blood to pour down into the eyes of their enemies, temporarily blinding them. So still, like,
Interesting.
that's kind of hardcore as shit.
Yeah, that's
Like,
pretty scary.
yeah. Especially if you hear that people are doing that, people are either like headbutting you and like, but also, wouldn't the razor blade hit their head too? Even if there was
It
hat
depends
there?
on like where it's stitched into. Like if you, because the way those caps are,
Oh,
there's
true.
like
It's
a
like more on the
seam at the
top.
front,
Yeah.
like on the brim of it.
And
So
there's
if
like a hard
it's
piece.
right, it's like
Yeah.
structured. So if you sewed them in between the seams, I could see that working.
But also like if you got slashed on the forehead or if you got blinded by razor blades, like everyone's gonna know that the Peaky Blinder got you.
Yeah,
Because you're
if-
gonna scar
get a
up
scar-
and you're gonna look like a Peaky Blinder got you. Like
Yeah.
if this were the case, right? If
Yeah.
historically this were the case,
Which
is
just
not
adds to how
necessarily, but-
scared then people would be
Yeah.
from it. If they were like, oh, John down the street got slashed by a Peaky Blinder, it could happen in your neighborhood. They're here. They're coming.
And then
for
there's
you.
even more drama because you're like, oh, why did they attack him? Like what is he, like what dirt do they have on him? Like what's his
Do they have dirt
what's
on
the
me?
tea?
What
Yeah.
is the
Him.
tea?
True. Birmingham historian Carl Chin believed the name is actually a reference to the gang's sartorial elegance. He says the popular usage of peaky at the beginning referred to any flat cap with a peak. Blinder was a familiar Birmingham slang term still used today to describe someone of a dapper appearance. A further explanation might be from the gang's own criminal behavior. They were known to sneak up behind someone, then pull the hat peak down over the victim's face so they could not describe who robbed them.
Okay, smart.
That makes more sense. Still like kind
Yeah.
of spooky because like you don't know what's going on. But
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's also interesting because like I don't know if you guys like ever say this, but I also know peaky to mean like it's like an adjective, like oh you're looking a little peaky,
Yeah.
which is like the opposite. So I was like kind of wondering if that had anything to do with it, but
It might be a more modern context for
Yeah.
Peaky. But yeah, so that's the Peaky Blinders. So what happened? What happened to them? They were doing so good, you know, slashing foreheads and pickpocketing very violently. After nearly a decade of political control, their growing influence brought on the attention of a larger gang, the Birmingham Boys, which weren't the Birmingham Boys in the show or no?
I think that's like one of the points of comparison, like that the writer made. Like he switched the two in the game. Like he's like, what if in the game? What am I saying? In the show, he was like, what if the Peaky Blinders won that? You know, so he
Yeah.
was like, what if they were the Birmingham Boys and they were successful instead of, you know,
Yeah.
not successful against them in keeping the racetrack control.
Yeah. So they were then the other big one that ended up winning. The Peaky Blinders expansion into racecourses led to violent backlash from the Birmingham Boys gang, which also Birmingham Boys, that's a better
boy band.
That's a
Yeah,
boy
I was
band.
gonna say it's Backstreet Boys but British.
Yeah. That's
The X
literally.
Factor just turning out Churning out the
Where
boys,
is
the
Simon
Birmingham boys.
Cowell?
Get them on it.
Yeah. Peaky Blinders families physically distanced themselves from Birmingham center into the countryside. With the Blinders' withdrawal from the criminal underworld, the Sabini gang moved in on the Birmingham boys gang and solidified political control over central England in the 1930s. Other elements such as education, discipline, and harsher policing and sentencing also contributed to the decease of the Blinders' influence, and by the 1920s, after many of their key members had been arrested or killed, they disappeared. As the specific gang known as the Peaky Blinders diminished, their name came to be used as a generic term to describe violent street youth, derogatory. The gang's activities lasted from the 1880s until the 1910s. However, the gang's legacy lives on in pop culture with numerous books, films, and TV shows inspired by their story.
There's a TV show about them.
Oh, we should have been talking about that the whole time. Oh.
What the hell?
Well, so then let's get into that. I only have a small paragraph about it. This is just a basic thing for people who don't know. It would totally suck if people listen. Although I would hope people listen even if they haven't heard of the show, because like me and Shiloh, we haven't watched the whole show. We want it to be applicable to all fans and people who have seen all of it or none of it. One such show is the popular British drama series Peaky Blinders is also the name of the drama series, which premiered in 2013 and has since gained a global following. The Peaky Blinders TV show, while highly fictionalized, does draw inspiration from the real-life history of the gang. The show is set in post-World War I Birmingham and follows the Shelby family as they navigate the dangerous criminal underworld of the city. While the show takes many creative liberties and embellishments, it does capture the spirit and atmosphere of the time period and some of the gang's real-life struggles and rivalries. In the show, Thomas Shelby is the charismatic leader of the gang, and his family members are some of his closest allies. The show features plenty of violence, intrigue, and political maneuvering, all set against the backdrop of a rapidly changing world. So, I mean, we've already kind of talked about the show a bunch already.
Yes.
But
Just a
it
little bit.
just a wee bit. But it is now I definitely need to watch it. Now knowing, and Shyla, I should ask you, as somebody who also hasn't watched it, now knowing the real life Peaky Blinders, does it make you want to watch the show, or are you like, it's not going to be as good as the real one, so why watch it?
That's a good question. I think it does make me want to watch it because I'm the kind of person where like I go down a rabbit hole kind of with things. So as soon as I have a little bit of information that's like interesting to me, which like this was, I like want more. And especially if the more is like a more dramatic version of it, sign me up.
And a really hot.
I was just gonna
Cillian
say,
Murphy.
and if there's a hot man in it,
And
Well,
Cillian Murphy.
sign me up twice.
Also, if you didn't want to watch it, I think I would have to move out.
Yeah, I guess. If that,
Shit.
I guess you got to get on that.
Ah, crap.
But then also you can watch it and be like, oh, they didn't use razor blades because the Gillette company didn't make them. False.
Yeah, there probably is some like something nice about watching a show and having no idea what's true and what's not.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately I am that person that is like, that's not how it happened. Me watching The Crown is like someone that used to identify as an Anglophile, constantly like, that's not right.
Yeah.
Diana actually wore a different dress on that tour
Actually.
date.
But also, I feel like there's enough here there's like so much that's fake in
Right.
the show in comparison to like how like I feel like you'll get through the bits where you know it's not real and you'll just settle into the pretend world they're giving you because it's like it's so just not real, if that makes sense. Like it's not even adjacent enough that you'll be able to be like,
Yeah, it's just a different world.
where is
Yeah.
the Gillette label on those breakers?
Well, also, we don't even know that much about the Peaky Blinders, the real one. We barely know anything anyway about the real life one. So obviously they were going to have to take some sort of liberties. So they get a pass.
It does make me happy that like, was it the writer or the creator, or is he both? I don't know.
I guess kind of both.
Like,
he's from the area.
That he's from there, so he has like some personal tie to the
Yeah.
story. I kind of like that idea, and I feel like you can be more forgiving with someone taking liberties if they're like still tying it into like local like mythology, folklore, like whatever.
Yeah, it's almost too like he's taking these little childhood stories that he grew up hearing from like, these people in his family, and he's like almost, what if I'm viewing this as a child and it's this grand like crazy adventure that maybe didn't happen but like is cool in my head, and then he made a show about it. So like who knows? Like yeah, there's like almost a bit of mysticism in it. And I think too, just like setting it post World War One, right? There's all these different layers of like trauma, PTSD that get brought into the fold, and I feel like it again. We were like a lot of our discussion was like us being like, how could you like want to do this to random ass people, and that choice as well to give them all of this emotional turmoil and like fodder and anger towards the government that forced them to go fight a war that was bloody and terrible and didn't really have a lot of reason to them. That gives you the characters the emotional fodder to like do these things and make you almost, like you were saying earlier, like sympathize, because you can recognize why maybe you can find ways to justify it in your own head because you care about them in that context. And like maybe if they didn't do that, you wouldn't care, and then it wouldn't have been a show because you would have been like, these guys are dicks.
You gotta kind of, even the like shitty characters in a show, like for it to work, you have to like some part of them, right? Yeah, it also I think will help that like I'm watching the show now after learning a bit, and because like bestie loves it versus some man
True.
Yeah, true.
trying to like Netflix and chill it into my life.
You're gonna know the facts now, so you can show it to some man,
right?
And like
oh
Gavin
my
said, you
god!
Can be like, actually, that's not how it happened, and you can be that. You can mansplain to him.
Oh, I can't wait to do that.
Yeah.
Also, the theme song is a banger. So like, if I
It
can
is.
listen to that over and over again, like I'm down.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, even just the whole visual of just dark, gritty England, like.
I mean, we love a period
cobblestones.
piece.
Yeah.
We love a period drama in this household.
Yeah.
So
then it's perfect.
Jordan's cat is named Darcy. So if that is like an
me.
indicator enough.
Yeah. Then perfect. Surprised that you haven't attempted to watch it sooner.
Yeah, that's actually true.
It's kind of rude, honestly.
I think I only have so much like brain space for like British men to be like frolicking around. Like they've already like
one at a time.
They filled up all the units. I think there's like one unit that like maybe is emptying out every once in a while when like a new tenant needs to come in. Like maybe they'll fill it then.
Also, like half the time, like okay, not half the time. Most of the time, we just watch shows that are like head empty shows,
right?
And the show like does require a little bit of like work.
Yeah.
Like it's just more than Love Island. So the bar is the bar is low. Like during Love Island, we can like play our little games on our phone, or in the future crochet, and like
you guys trying to get into crocheting?
We're gonna learn. We have like a plan to like one day go out and buy all of our crochet materials and then come home, and our friend is gonna teach us how to crochet, and maybe we'll be watching Peaky Blinders and crocheting.
Maybe
there
we
is
can
some
crochet a hat.
You could a little flat cap.
Oh my god. I do love the idea of us crocheting while we watch like a really violent like freaky
that
thing
does feel
happening.
Peak grandma. I feel like that's grandma culture. Can we appropriate that?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Jordan. This was lovely.
This is very fun for me.
I had a great time.
Well, all right. Next time I'll pull up, and you guys can be crocheting, and then I'll just be reading the story.
Maybe we'll crochet little hand mitts for our microphones.
Oh, like the foam, the covers for like the pop.
Oh no, I think she.
Well, I know you meant a hand warmer, but I'm saying you could crochet like the.
Make a whole windscreen.
Audio bros around the world are shaking right now.
Shaking in their boots.
Quivering. Well, for the Dark Archive, I'm Gavin.
I'm Shyla.
And I'm Jordan.
And we haven't come up with I don't know if there's a tagline. Stay dark. What's a lesson that we learned from this episode?
Don't fuck with the Peaky Blinders.
Don't trust well-dressed men in caps, leopard caps.
If a man in a cap in bell bottom pants comes up to you and he whips his hat at you, duck.
Well, he's probably going to be a short man, so
That's
arguably,
even better.
Like your boob.
If you're
Yeah,
tall, you're
arguably-
safe. Because they can't hit you in the face then.
well,
they
they
can
can still-
headbutt you if you're taller than them.
Oh my god, Shyla, you're
Oh, shit.
you're a dick.
I'm a prime
You're 18.
target. Oh my god, I was never here.
If a man in bell bottom pants, flat cat comes up to you, Shyla, run because it's the Peaky Blinders. Peaky
In
Blinders.
New York City, they're here.
They're invading. They finally.
They're in
It's
Bushwick.
taken them
I've seen them.
100 years, but they've made it to Bushwick. That's good. That's a good place to end off. This podcast is produced and engineered by Gavin Berger with High Tops Media. The Dark Archive is co-hosted by Gavin Berger, Julia Siegel, Chris Massarelli, and Shaila Jayasinghe. Our theme music is composed by Jeffrey Taylor. You can rate and review The Dark Archive on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and check out more episodes of The Dark Archive available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Dark Archive Podcast and on TikTok at The Dark Archive. And see more of our content with High Tops Media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at High Tops Media.